But if you want to do that, watch your bulletin for that. And I tell you, that, and you can join us in the next membership class. But I tell you, it's been fun around here the last couple of weeks, hasn't it? It's been fun. Right? I don't know. It's fun at church. Church should always be fun, and I love baptisms. And just so you know, over the past 2 weeks, I think the number we've baptized, I kind of lost count, but I think we've baptized 34 people in the last 2 weeks. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. That is fantastic, and there is nothing I like more than seeing people come to Christ and accept Jesus Christ and as their Savior and come up here and be baptized. I had one of the guys tell me, it's like, man, I used to think that you were talking directly to me at church, but then I got up there and realized that you can't see anything. I'm like, yeah, I can't. So it's all good. But I love that. I love baptism, and I love hearing this. Don't you love the stories, baptism stories? If you've been here the past couple of weeks and heard those stories, I just love those, and there's a couple of things that I love about them. The first is just influential people. I love to hear when people stand up here and say, it's because of this person or because of this person that had an influence in my life, and these people have impacted me, and not because that's something great that they did or it's something great that I've done or Cheryl or whoever's name gets mentioned, but I tell you that I love hearing that because it just reassures me that people are saying, you know what, I'm going to be obedient. I'm going to let God use me in a way that He wants to use me, and I want to be all in. And you hear that in their stories over and over. And I tell you, if you've never heard your name mentioned in a baptism story about influencing, pouring into somebody, you just well up and think, man, God, not because it's something great that you've done, but it's just God has worked through me to influence somebody else in my community, and that part of the stories I love. The second part of the stories I love to hear are stories where people say, hey, you know what, I was there once, I kind of got this, but then I fell away, and I walked away, and I strayed, and that's a challenge that we have, like with some of us big stuff people, and I know you're probably sick of hearing big stuff, but some of the challenges that I talk with my junior and senior high guys about is just how are we going to bring it back? How are we going to live it here? How are we going to maintain this relationship that we have with Christ? And that's difficult. It's hard. And I want to talk a little bit about that this morning. I want to just share a little bit about that. So I wouldn't say, and I would just start by saying this, I wouldn't say necessarily that I'm a cheapskate in life, but I do like a good bargain. Anybody else? Anybody like a good bargain? Let me just read, so much so that I looked up the definition of cheapskate, and it says this: a stingy person, somebody who buys cheap. I highlighted that. Buys cheap in favor of higher quality or better stuff, even though they might be able to afford the better, perhaps ungenerously trying not to spend too much on their friends. Anybody like that? Anybody want to confess? We can pray for you right now. No, just cheapskate. I don't think generally in life I'm a cheapskate, but I love a good bargain, and I am so much so that I'm crippled by my phone. Like, I cannot go into a store, I don't care if it's Walmart or I don't care where it is, and I have my phone and I see a price of something, I'm like, but I can get that cheaper on Amazon. I'm typing in, or eBay, I can get that on eBay. I love eBay. I'm like an eBay addict. And I was like, I can get that for $2 cheaper on Amazon, free shipping, and I just love that. And I'm crippled by it. I can't buy anything anymore without checking eBay or Amazon. I love a good bargain, and I sometimes that works out, and sometimes it doesn't. And one time when the girls were small and my kids were smaller, we wanted to buy them four-wheelers for Christmas, right? How awesome is that to get a four-wheeler for Christmas? But I couldn't afford four-wheelers for Christmas, so I got on eBay, and I've got some really crappy four-wheelers. Can you say, I'm not sure you can say crappy in church, but I just did. We got some really crappy, I think they unloaded them they were direct from China, but I got them super cheap, and I was like, oh, these are going to be awesome. And they look cool. I mean, they looked awesome, and they had little headlights, and it was just everything, and they were junk. Like, the first day we got them, like, hey, be careful, kids, and I was, following them around, picking up parts, off the, junk was falling off of them, and they were just junk. And we had these things, and it just didn't, they were so cheap, and I bought cheap, and then so I finally got rid of them, sold one of them to Jeremy. I apologize for that. I did. I really did. I sold one of them to Jeremy, his poor kids. Just so you know, he got rid of it too, so I'm not alone. We pass the love on. See, that's what we're about here at Salem Grace. We just want to share all of our crap. But I was just terrible, and sometimes I do good. I get on Craigslist, and I got wheels and tires this week. Craigslist, Cheryl posted it. We had a good date night. Got some awesome wheels and tires for my truck. It was awesome. Corey put them on. They were cheap. I loved them. They're great. They haven't blown out yet, but sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm not necessarily, but I don't mind buying used stuff, and sometimes it's good to spend money on used stuff, and there's some things I'll buy used, and this is no reflection. I'm not making anybody feel bad if you've bought. I've never bought a brand new car. I just haven't. I've always bought a used one. And if you do, great, that's fine, whatever. But there are certain things in my life that I've decided, but at some point in time, there are some things in my life that I've decided it's probably okay to spend some money and buy the good stuff. And not buy used. And so just here's a couple things, just for example. First thing, that I don't mind to buy new is, for example, underwear. I'm not buying used underwear. I'm not. I draw the line right there. I don't care if they're fresh on the yard sale table, 25 cents. It's just not. I don't care how good of a bargain that is. There are some things in my life that I have standards for. And like a couple months ago, Rachel had surgery on her shoulder, and it was like one of those things I wasn't like calling around trying to figure out, hey, how much will you do this surgery for? Will you do it for $5? Hey, Rach, I got a bargain. We got $200. He'll do your shoulder surgery. Some guy in a van down by the river. There's some things we just don't compromise. It reminds me of a joke. A guy got his arm cut off, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, well, it's going to be like $50,000. And he's like, I don't have that much money. So he went to a couple others, finally found one guy that would put his arm back on for $5,000. And a couple weeks later, his friend said, hey, how'd your surgery go? He said, it went awesome. But there are some things in life worth paying the full cost for, and to go on and to go ahead and be 100% all in. And so when we're choosing to follow Christ, for most of us, it comes down to two simple questions, really. What is this going to cost me? And is it going to be worth it? Really, two things that I consider when I'm looking for a bride. What's it going to cost me? And is it going to be worth it? And I want you, this morning as I go through this message, I want you to just think about that individually for each one of you. Following Jesus Christ, what's it going to cost me? And is it going to be worth it? And I want you to think about those things. And I want to tell you a story just in Luke chapter 14, verse 26. I want to share with you a story. And Jesus was walking and preaching, and he had this crowd of Jews that were considering these questions. Jesus was talking to this crowd, and they were considering those questions. Basically, what's it going to cost? And Jesus spoke to them and said, you need to consider these things. And we pick it up in Luke chapter 14, verse 26, and he says this, if you want to be my disciple, pay attention to these words. If you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, I underlined that by comparison, we'll come back to that, but that's important, hate everyone else, your father and mother, your wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life, otherwise you cannot be my disciple. Wow. Hate's a strong word, isn't it? We teach our kids not to hate. Some of you are probably thinking, well, wait a minute, whoa, back up. Jesus isn't about that. He talked about love and loving each other and loving your neighbor as yourself, and he did, but that's why we put that by comparison in there. The fact of the matter is, Jesus was saying to this crowd of Jews, everything else in your life, secondary. I'm first, period. If you want to follow me, you've got to, by comparison, hate absolutely everybody else in your life and everything else in your life. And you're saying, wait a minute, how can I do that? By comparison. So basically, what he's saying there is the idea is not that we should hate our family or our lives. He's not saying that, okay? Stay with me. But that in comparison to Jesus, if we were forced to choose, the winner in that choice must always and will always be Jesus. Period. If we're ever forced to choose, it always is Jesus. If you're ever in a position where you had to choose between your family and Jesus, it's always Jesus. And some of you are going, wow, that's a hard concept to get your head around. And I realize that. But by placing Jesus in priority, we will love our families better than we ever have before. We will love our wives like we never have before. We will love our children like we never have before. We will experience life like we never have before if we just keep Him center focus. Matthew 16:25 says this: if you hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. Do you get that? If you're hanging on to your life, you're going to lose it. Give it up to Jesus. And if you give up your life for Jesus' sake, you will save it. And you got to understand this crowd of people that Jesus was talking to. These were Jews. These were people that from the time they were old enough to walk and talk had been going to church and learning how to be Jews. Every moment of their life, their family, their friends, their mom, their dad, their sister, their brothers, aunt, uncles, their wives, everything rotated around that religion. And here Jesus steps onto the scene and He says, hey, it's not just about religion. And I'm telling you this morning, it's not about coming to church. This, what we do here on Sunday morning, it's not about all this. It's good. This is good. I like it. Keep coming. But these people were just so hung up on being Jews that everything focused around that. And so they were doing everything right. So here's what this would have meant for them. And Jesus was saying, hey, consider the cost. Consider what this is going to cost you to follow me. Have you ever done that? Are you all in? This crowd was made up of diehard Jews. They were committed to following the ways that they had been taught. Their family and friends, following Jesus would have actually cost them some of their family and friends. Here's a tip for you this morning. Following Jesus may cost you some friends. Do you get that? We talked about that in our small group down in Big Stuff with my guys. Brock spoke up, some other guys that spoke up realized that their decision to follow in Christ has cost them friends. Your decision to follow Jesus Christ and put yourself and separate yourself from some people that are bad influences on your life need to happen. It may cost you some of that. It may cost you family. I've actually had parents of kids tell me that their parents had told them that they're getting too religious. Believe that? It may cost you relationships with your family. Their way of life, what was important to them, their jobs, their ability. These Jews would have sacrificed everything to follow Jesus. Their social lives would have been impacted. Who they hung out with, their entire social status would have been at risk. Followers in that day would have been subjected to severe ridicule and persecution from family and friends. It was something that He asked them to consider. I remember one time we were kids, I was in high school probably, and my mom and dad always tried to take us on vacation. They always took us somewhere. We'd load up the car and fight with each other on the way down, and it was good fun. And we'd go to Biloxi, Mississippi, and this was before all the casinos came and all that stuff, but we would go to Biloxi, Mississippi, and I'll never forget, my family will know what I'm talking about, but we can go out to eat a lot. Like going out to eat for us was maybe like, Long John Silver's or Ponderosa. Love that salad bar. But we would go, and that night we decided to go eat somewhere different, and try something new. And there was this restaurant like out on this pier. It was like a seafood restaurant out on this pier, and it was just an awesome setting, and the ocean was right there. And we decided to go out there and get something to eat for dinner. And we walked out there, and the waitress came in and said, hey, can I take your order? And we said, can I get your drink order? And we gave him all of our drink, and we ordered an iced tea and, sat there. And then she brought back menus, and then we opened the menu, and we're like, oh. And I kid you not, no lie, the song playing on the radio was Take My Breath Away by, Berlin. As honest as I'm standing here, that's what it was. And our breath was taken away when we saw the prices on the menu. And so, has everybody done that? Everybody ever done that? You open the menu, you're like, okay, check please. and we got our sweet tea and we left. And we went to Popeye's Chicken or somewhere, a Cajun chicken, I don't know. But it was good fun, and I remember that. It was just too much. And have you ever had, if you have to, sometimes if you have to ask what's going to cost, then it maybe shouldn't be there. And I remember that, just so that sometimes it's just too much. And I think, unfortunately, that's the case for some of us. We consider what it's going to cost us, and it's just too much to pay. And we want to grab our iced tea and hit the road. Reminded me of a story in Mark chapter 10, verse 20 through 22. Some of you know this story, but it's a rich young ruler. And it's this guy who basically had done everything right his whole life. He'd followed Christ his whole life. He went to church every Sunday. He did all the things right. And he says this, verse 20, the guy speaks up and says, "Teacher," the man replied, "I've obeyed all these commandments since I was young." Looking at the man, Jesus felt genuine love for him. I love that part. Because I think Jesus looks at us and feels genuine love for us. He wants to give us a life that we can't even imagine. He felt genuine love for him. "There is still one thing you haven't done," he told him. "Go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." And at this, the man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. And I just wonder, I couldn't help but wonder, and I was thinking about this all week. What are you willing to pay? Is the price too high for you? And I think for many it will be. Some will be like the guy in that picture today, this morning. You'll consider what it's going to cost you to follow Jesus Christ when you leave here. When you go back to work, and you go back to the environment that you live in, and you go back to the friends, and you guys go back to school, and you go back to college. Some of you go to high school. Some of you go to junior high. Some of us will just go back to where we go every day, and we'll consider the price too high. And the fact of the matter is, Jesus knew. I'm not saying you all have to sell everything you have, but Jesus knew that was his thing. That was his one thing. There's one thing in our life, and Jesus pokes his finger on that. And he says, "Give me that. I want that. I want you to give me that." That one thing that we're holding on to. But unfortunately, some of us will drop our head and walk away sad because we're not willing to give God everything, to be all in, to pay full price. We want to find a bargain. We want a church bargain. We want all the goodness and the glory that it takes, but we don't want any of the cost. What is it that makes you walk away sad? Consider that this morning. I remember Big Stuff, they talked about being a percentage follower. And jobs half finished, And a percentage follower is really just somebody who follows Jesus 1% of the time. Maybe you're sitting here this morning and saying, "Trent, I'm like the guy, I've done everything right, I've been at church, I've done all this stuff, I'm coming, but I'm not 100%. We want to follow Jesus a percentage of the time. There's this house, Jesus actually goes on and he talks to this crowd in Luke chapter 14:28. And he says, Luke chapter 14:28, it says, "But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first counting and calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it?" There's this house I drive by sometimes, and it's just a foundation right now. But I drive by it a lot, and for years I've driven by this house. And at one point in time, I think it had walls. Like they were building this house. It's just a foundation and a fireplace. And then it just sat there forever. And then when I would drive by again, I would see, okay, oh, there's walls up now. Like people would started to build this wall. They would start to build this house. And then they'd get like all of the walls up, but no roof. And they'd just sit there. And every time I drive by, I'd look at it and go, man, it's just like, it's not even halfway done. And it would just deteriorate, and the lumber would sit out in the rain and the weather, and it would deteriorate and deteriorate and deteriorate. And then until now, if you drive by now, it's still back to the foundation. And I think that's exactly what Jesus was talking about here. I think sometimes we want this relationship with Jesus Christ, but we don't realize it's actually going to be some work. It's free. It is free. God's made it easy. But consider the cost. And I just wonder what kind of damage we do. What kind of damage are we doing to our witness, to our community, and to our families by living unfinished lives? By being a percentage follower versus being 100% all in. And counting the cost and saying, you know what, no matter what it costs, I'm sticking with it. I don't care if it costs me every friend that I have. I don't care what that looks like. I'm going to count the cost. I don't care. I want to be all in. I'm going to be 100%. Percentage followers. Do we really reflect Jesus in every area of my life? Do I really trust and care? Do I really trust him to care for me? Or do I have to help Jesus along the way by seizing control and letting go of what we seize control? We can't let go of everything. We're like, you know what, God? Hey, how about 50-50? I'll go 50-50 with you. You take that, I'll just hang on to this part of my life. I want eternal life. I want life. I want to have fulfillment. I want to have peace. I want to have all this stuff, but I'm not really willing to give you this part of my life. I want to hold on to that. Maybe you're 80. Maybe you're 80-20. Maybe you're 60-40. I don't know. Where are you? Where are you? You know, my dad used to tell this story. I don't know if he did this as a kid or whatever, but they had this log. They say the log, raccoons. We have some raccoons around our house. They say if you take a hole and drill a hole in the log, and you run some nails in kind of at an angle, and put something shiny down in the bottom of the hole, they'll see that, and they're naturally inquisitive, and they want what's in the bottom of the hole. And so they'll stick their hand down in there to grab what's in the bottom of the hole, and when they have it in their hand, it forms a fist. And then they can't get their hand out of the hole. They just keep tugging, when all they would have to do is really just let go of whatever it is at the bottom of the hole. If they let go of that, then they could squeeze their hand back out the hole. But they don't. They hold on to that crap in the bottom of the hole. And they're trapped. They're stuck there. It's just such a picture of our lives. God has freedom for us. He's given us his Son. He wants us to experience that. But we just keep holding on to it. Keep holding on to that junk in the bottom of our hole. I'm going to ask the band to come this morning. I think following Christ is tough. Consider the cost. One of the biggest things that we have, we talk about it, big stuff, in our small group and stuff, and we try to help hold each other accountable when we get back. But it's how are we going to live this when we get home? And that's when it gets real. I want to give you some examples of what that looks like. What that looks like, the cost looks like. It may look like this to you. I don't know. There's some things that I just thought of. Maybe refusing to offer support to a family member for a decision that they made that may be immoral in God's eyes. You ever have to do that? You ever have to look at a family member and say, you know what? You're making decisions that I can't support, and I'm not going to support you. I'll love you, but I'm not going to support that. That's when it gets real. It's exactly when it gets real, when you have to face that sort of stuff. Refusing to endorse a relationship that doesn't model God's plan. I think in our society today, we just think hey, it's okay. Just live together, do whatever you want to. I'm telling you, as a church, I can't endorse that. It's not in God's plan. It gets hard. Testifying about a crime when everyone else in the office would argue that you're a tattletale. Being the only person not going to the party on the weekend because everybody else there is going to be completely wasted. That's when it gets real. Having a tough conversation with people about the truth, knowing full well it may be the last time that they speak to you. You ever do that? Sometimes I speak the truth up here and I wonder how many of you are going to sit here and go, man, I just can't get my head wrapped around that. That's when it gets real. And I think sometimes we wonder if it's worth it. Here's the thing. Our understanding about counting the cost is only make-believe until we're put in those circumstances. You get that? That's where the rubber meets the road. It's easy to sit in church and it's easy to sit here with other people and say, yes, I want to follow Jesus Christ. But when we get out in the real world and we're faced with those circumstances and we're like, whew, that's tough. So what it boils down to are the two questions. What's it going to cost you? Follow Jesus Christ. What's it going to cost you? And is it going to be worth it? In other words, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the juice going to be worth it at the end? And that's tough, but let me tell you, it's going to be. Yeah, I know that. It's because God's word tells me that it's going to be. He's promised to walk with us. He's promised to meet our needs. He's promised, and he's good on his promises. Jeremiah 29:11 says this, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you future and a hope." If you're sitting here this morning dealing with junk in your life that you're holding on to, let it go. Let it go. And experience the freedom like you've never felt it. You may lose some friends. You may have a tough time talking about it. The road ain't easy, but it's so worth it. God has a perfect plan for your life, and he wants each one of us to experience that. He wants you to experience that plan for your life. Romans 8:28 says this, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those that love God and are called by his name, and called according to his purpose for them." God has a plan for your life. I want you to stand this morning. Just ask yourself this morning, and I want you to take a minute. In a minute, we're gonna do communion here, and that's an awesome offering. It's a way for us to remember the incredible sacrifice that Jesus made for our lives, that we could have this freedom for free. God paid this price for all of us, me included. I love communion. We're going to do that here in a minute. But before we get there, I just believe that there's probably some of you in this crowd this morning that are either have never made that decision to follow Christ completely in your life, or some of you are just percentage Christians. Some of you are 40% in, 30, 20, 80. I don't know exactly where each one of you are. Some of you are at 0. You're still trying to figure out if this is real. I want to give you an opportunity this morning to pray and ask Christ into your heart. But just ask yourself, be honest with yourself this morning. You don't answer to me or anybody else sitting beside you or anybody else. Just yourself this morning, ask you, what's it going to cost me? And is it really too much for me to pay? And I'm going to hang my head and walk away sad. Or am I going to give it all and pay full price? Am I looking for a church bargain? Or do I want to pay for the real deal? Let me pray with you this morning. Jesus, I just ask that you would just come into this place, that you would fill our hearts full. Lord, I just ask if there's somebody here, just in the quietness of this moment, with our heads bowed, God, and just focused on you, just for a second. God, that they would consider asking you into their life. And if there's somebody here that says, yes, I want to do that, just pray this prayer. Jesus, forgive me of my sins. Come into my life. I want to give you 100%. I want to experience everything that you have for me. Come into my life and make me full. I want to ask you into my life for the first time. If you've asked Jesus into your life for the first time, every head bowed, I don't want anybody looking around, but just slip your hand up so I can pray for you. Is anybody here like that? Anybody? Yep. Let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you so much for these people that have asked you in their life for the first time. We rejoice in that. God, I just pray that you would fill their heart full of your presence. And God, I pray if there's somebody else in here, maybe it's church people, maybe it's people that have been here forever, maybe at some point in time we've already made that decision to follow Christ, but we're just probably hovering around 50 or 60% in. We're not all 100% in. God, help us to make that decision to be 100% and just let go of absolutely everything, our jobs, our careers, our friends, our plans, all my dreams, all my plans, God, like we sing in the song. Help us to trust you with it. God, I just pray if there's somebody like that here this morning, that they would just say, God, restore me to 100% with you. I want to be all in. I want to be 100%. God, I just pray if there's somebody like that just prayed that prayer, that you would just lift your hand. Just lift your hand if you want to be all in. See it? God, bless us as we go to communion this morning. Thank you for your presence and for the cost the price that you paid, God. Help us to consider the cost that it's going to take for us to be dedicated to you and be committed to that. God, give us strength as we leave this place. Give us courage to have conversations that we've been avoiding. Give us the courage to stand up for what we believe in and really show people what Christ is doing in our life, not just tell them. God, I love you so much. Thank you for your grace and your forgiveness. God, I pray as we enter into communion, God, that we would feel your presence. Thank you so much for the cost that you paid.